Japan is the only country in the world which got rich without getting fat. Look at this graph. It shows a stark contrast between the US and Japan. The US has an obesity rate of over 35% and Japan below 5%. Surprised, no? This got me super curious and I dug in. So in this video, we will talk about 3 things. Number 1, how did Japan get rich without getting fat? Number 2, why did the US not make similar choices? Number 3, where does India stand? Are we more like Japan or the United States? Let's begin. In 1945, the war had ended. Japan had lost. But it didn't just lose the war. It faced the worst bombing in the history of mankind. Its GDP per capita fell by 43% from around $4,900 in 1940 to around $2,800 in 1946. The country was not just economically weaker, it was slowly losing its healthy population. Look at how Japan's calorie consumption went down during the war, from 2,265 calories to 1,680 calories. Saying that the nation was starving would be an understatement. And honestly, numbers don't do justice to the plight faced by civilians in Japan. A publication by the Princeton University gives a detailed account of what transpired. By the latter half of 1944, civilians were eating grasses and weeds, often with government encouragement. In 1942, Tokyo families queued for food for an average of 4.5 hours each day. Result: Japan's life expectancy took a drastic nosedive. It almost touched 30 years at one point. Yet, this is not a story of despair and gloom. This is the story of one of the strongest comebacks. Japan did not let its failure become its fate. By 1968, it became the second largest free market economy in the world. This turnaround story came to be widely known as the Japanese economic miracle. From slashing tax rates to betting big on technology, Japan did a whole host of things to revive its economy. But at the core, it also focused on its most precious asset, its people. To understand this better, I read a book called Magic Pill that talks about obesity and Ozempic, a weight loss drug that has taken the world by storm. Here's what I found. After the defeat of Japan in the Second World War, when the country was in ruins, the new democratic government realized that if they didn't have a healthy population, they would have nothing, and they stepped up this transformation. The Japanese only really started eating what we think of Japanese food in the years after the Second World War. To tackle this problem of hunger and undernourishment at the grassroots, Japan took 3 major measures. Number 1, launched a school lunch program. Number 2, embedded healthy eating in their culture. Number 3, nudged people to make healthier eating choices. Let's look at each one of them one by one. First, the school lunch program. This program helped the nation get back on its feet. According to a 2018 survey, 95.2% of Japan's schools continue to provide these lunches. Kids get a complete, nutritious lunch with fresh ingredients. No processed or frozen food is allowed. Every school needs to have a nutritionist, and most importantly, the principal must eat the same lunch as the students. The lunch program is not just about food, it is also about education. You see, before the kids start eating, they are taught about the source and the nutritional value of each item. They don't just learn to eat healthy, they also learn to enjoy and appreciate healthy eating. This program also keeps evolving with the changing times and needs of the nation. There have been 3 eras of school meals so far. First, just after World War II, which left food shortages. So addressing nutritional deficiencies was the priority. Second, the economic miracle phase, where there was abundance. So the focus was on preventing and eliminating non-communicable diseases caused by overnutrition. And third, the present day, when Japan is fighting more complex nutritional challenges due to falling birth rates and an aging society. Interestingly, the United States played a major role in helping Japan build the school lunches. You see, from 1945 to 1951, Japan was occupied by the United States. During this time, the Allied forces, including the United States, were actively providing school supplies to run the school lunch program in Japan. After gaining complete independence, Japan diligently continued with the food lunches and formalized them as the school lunch law. Second, Japan embedded healthy eating in its culture. You see, Japan is home to the Okinawa Blue Zone. There's a whole Netflix docuseries around this. This place is special because it is home to centenarians, people who live for 100 years or more. Their secret? Eating in moderation. Let me tell you a very interesting Kit Kat story here. So Japan is popular for the number of Kit Kat flavors available in the country. It sells about 4 million Kit Kat minis each day. Yes, their most popular size is the minis, living by the philosophy of eating in moderation, you see. Even soda drinks in Japan are available in smaller sizes as compared to the US. But I was confused. If the Japanese do like sweets so much, how do they manage to avoid obesity? I asked this question to a doctor from Japan, and his answer was really interesting. He said that Kit Kat is mostly marketed to foreigners, and he's never seen a Japanese person eat one. Sweets are common there, but people don't really like them as much. The Japanese serve food in smaller portions and encourage traditional practices like hara hachibu, which translates to eating until 80% full. This helps them combat overeating. Then there is this interesting rule in Japanese cooking, and it is very similar to the concept of shadras in Ayurveda. As per this rule, each meal should have 5 tastes: sweetness, saltiness, sourness, bitterness, and umami. Second, each dish should have 5 colors: black, white, green, yellow, and red. And thirdly, each dish should have 5 skills to prepare the meal: cutting, simmering, grilling, deep frying, and steaming. This ensures that you have a balanced diet. And it's not just people in Okinawa. Other Japanese citizens also follow this culture. They have another culture, which is the complete opposite of the US. Eating on the go is frowned upon in Japan, even considered rude. Yes, if you eat while walking or even commuting on the bus or train in Japan, be prepared to get stares from the locals. You see, the Japanese believe that food is supposed to be enjoyed and cherished, not just gobbled up on the go. Third, and the most interesting measure, nudge people to eat better. Despite the strong cultural influence, packed foods and fast food joints made their way to Japan.
Body weight of Japanese people has increased due to the westernized lifestyle.
As the years went by, the obesity rates also started inching up. Since 2000, it started increasing at a much faster rate. It was a far cry from other developed nations, but it still got the government stressed. So in 2008, the government took a bold step. It introduced the Metabo Law. As per this law, an employer needs to get the weight and waistline of every employee measured once a year. If it breaches a certain threshold, the employer and the employee have to draw a health plan to bring it down. If a company fails to do so, it can be fined. And to stay compliant, companies do all sorts of things, making employees wear wristbands for counting steps, encouraging them to post photos of their food plates, hosting morning exercises, serving healthy meals at the office, and whatnot. With this new law in place, the country had a new task upon itself. In a world full of McDonald's and Burger King, it had to be the maa ke haath ka khana. And it did. It used something called choice architecture. Choice architecture is an interesting concept in behavioral economics. Let me explain in 20 seconds. Say you run a canteen and you want your customers to pick donuts over salads. So you will put donuts right at the entrance of the canteen and display them more prominently than salads. Now when a customer comes in, they will look at the donuts first and will be more tempted to buy donuts than salads. This is choice architecture, using principles of human psychology to nudge them to make certain choices. Now, to understand if Japan had such similar interventions, I turned to the same doctor from Japan who I was speaking to. He mentioned the ease and accessibility of walking everywhere rather than driving. The city is designed in a way that naturally integrates more physical activity into daily routines. Plus, I found ample evidence that healthier choices are just as easy and convenient as non-healthy choices. You have fast food restaurants, but at the same time, you also have restaurants serving hot, healthy, freshly prepared food. Interestingly, Japan is the vending machine capital of the world.
Japan is famous for the abundance of its vending machines. The number per capita is reportedly the highest in the world, generating a whopping $34 billion a year.
It has 41 lakh vending machines. That's about one vending machine for 31 people in Japan versus one machine for 66 people in the US. These vending machines in Japan are present everywhere. Train stations, office buildings, parks, and they offer everything from food and drinks to clothing and even toys. And when I say food and drinks, I mean healthy food and drinks. In fact, there's a salad vending machine called Salad Stand in Tokyo. While the vending machines do offer sugary drinks, there are multiple options for non-sugary healthy drinks. In the US, most vending machines have only water as the non-sugary drink. So, law, check. Choice architecture, check. Now there's a third element that helps Japan keep obesity under check. It is the crab mentality. Let me explain. Basically, if you put multiple crabs in a vessel, the crabs try to pull each other down when one tries to escape the vessel. It's the if I can't have it, you can't have it either mentality. Now the Japanese also seem to have this mentality, but in a positive way. The Japanese help keep the weights of their colleagues down by poking them, both literally and figuratively. More like those friends who force you to stay healthy. Yeah, fat shaming can be toxic, but in Japanese culture, it is perceived as healthy peer pressure. But is the definition of fat same in all countries, especially in US and Japan? Well, no. In my conversation with Dr. Japan, I discovered something else also. In the US, a BMI of 30 plus makes you obese, but it does not take into account the ethnic diversity. In Japan, the ill effects of obesity, such as heart diseases, tend to creep in at a BMI of 25 plus. So if we look at the real obesity of Japan per se, it would be around 25%. Even then, the number is lower than the US. All in all, Japan has really adopted a healthy way of living. Health, after all, is wealth. Now let's flip the coin. It wasn't just the Japanese whose diets had changed post the Second World War. The United States also saw a revolution in their dietary habits. But unlike the Japanese, their habits changed for the worse. Let's go back to where we started. The year is 1945.
In less than a year, the armed forces returned more than 12 million young men to civilian life.
The United States had won the war. It was time to celebrate. It was time to go back to normal life. Factories used for war production started producing civilian goods such as cars and home appliances. This increase in supply was met with enthusiastic demand. The demand was high due to three major reasons. First, disposable income had gone up. By 1945, Americans were saving an average of 21% of their personal disposable income compared to just 3% in the 1920s. You see, inflation due to supply shortages was the last thing the government wanted during the war. So they had put rationing programs in force. Civilians had no option but to save money. But as soon as the war restrictions were lifted, Americans rushed to the stores with jingling pockets. And they went to buy everything, from clothes and shoes to homes and cars. Yup, revenge shopping of those times. New car sales quadrupled between 1945 and 1955. By the end of the 1950s, around 75% of American households owned at least one car. Second, the GI Bill. Now that the war was over, the US government had to find meaningful jobs for the war veterans. So it introduced the GI Bill in 1944. The bill provided them unemployment payments, federal financial aid, upskilling activities, medical care, loan guarantees to buy homes or start businesses. As a result, 8 million veterans attended colleges and universities, and 20% of the new homes built after the war were bought by veterans. This further nurtured the cycle of increased spending and increased demands. Third, increased women participation in the workforce. 6 million women joined the workforce when the US was at war. It was expected that once the war was over, things would go back to normal and women would again assume the traditional role as housewives. But as per a report by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, women's labor force participation increased dramatically from the 1960s through the 1980s before slowing in the 1990s. It reached its peak of 60% in 1999. Increased women's participation in the workforce meant an increase in dual-income households. This further increased the spending capacity and the need for convenience. All in all, the US economy was getting back on its feet. Consumption was at a high, and while the consumption for bigger items like homes and cars was rising, there was a problem brewing at the core. A packaged food industry was being formed.
It's McDonald's delicious Big Mac sandwich.
An industry that would forever change the culture of the United States. You see, with a rise in capitalism, time motion studies came in. Optimizing for productivity became the North Star metric. Lunch breaks became shorter. More employees wanted easy, quick, on-the-go food now. Some wartime habits were also here to stay. The people in the US were hooked to canned food. Even after the war ended, the consumption of canned vegetables remained strong. Looking at this new America, visionary businessmen rushed to set up their fast food chains. 7 out of the top 10 fast food chains in the US that we now know were established within 20 years of World War II. Innovations in food processing and packaging technology also played a significant role in helping the Great American Food Fest. TV dinners, frozen and fast-cooked meals that could be heated quickly were introduced in 1953. Tetra Pak, polythene and cellophane were all introduced in packaging during the 50s and 60s. Commercial microwaves introduced in the 1960s made life all the more easy. The Americans kept lapping up this new form of food in the name of convenience and taste. Soon after, there was no looking back. By 1997, the Americans were consuming soda more than any other drink. In 1945, Americans drank more than 4 times as much milk as carbonated soft drinks, but in 1997, they drank almost 2.5 times more soda than milk. The next stat that I'm going to share is going to shock you. By 1997, Americans consumed 154 pounds of caloric sweeteners, that is 53 teaspoons of added sugar per person per day. The year 1978 further escalated the Great American Food Fest. Ironically, around this time, Japan developed a technology that would help the US fast food and packaged food companies lower prices and sell super-sized products. It developed an enzyme technology that made the commercial production of fructose syrup feasible. By 1978, the price of the fructose syrup was around 53 to 63% lower than the price of sugar. And this gave Americans yet another reason to substitute their good old sugar with high fructose syrup. Now remember how the US helped Japan establish its school lunches? While the US exported healthy eating habits to Japan, Japan unknowingly played a key role in exporting obesity to the US. The fast food companies also left no stone unturned to woo customers. Psychological tricks, irresistible marketing, and somehow managing to open fast food outlets at food deserts. They did it all. Now, after decades of unhealthy eating, Americans are finally realizing the dark side of fast food. And maybe they're trying to right their wrongs. See how caloric sugar consumption in the US has fallen over the past few years. But things have still not changed drastically. As reported by the New York Times, ultra-processed food still accounts for 67% of the calories consumed by children and teenagers in the US. More than 40% of Americans are still obese. Well, if you're wondering, why can't they just eat healthy and get back in shape? It's easier said than done. Doesn't it get difficult even for us to resist that cheesy burger and choose a homemade boring chapati at times? Unhealthy eating is like an addiction, and a lot of American consumers are caught in this loop. And well, their willpower is not all to blame. Here's what I learned in the book Magic Pill. When you gain weight and stay there for a few months, that weight becomes your new normal. your body will prevent you from losing it. It will slow down your metabolism. It will make you hungry just to prevent you from shedding those extra kilos. Even if consumers start choosing healthy food, the situation is not very likely to change overnight. Food lobbies are leaving no stone unturned to make sure they rule the market. In the US, food and soft drink related companies spent $106 million on lobbying in 2023, almost twice as much as the tobacco and alcohol industries combined. As much as the fast food industry needs the government also needs them, at least in the short run. Just look at McDonald's impact on the US's GDP. Added $76 billion to US GDP, contributing about 1.2 million jobs in the US, generating more than $15.3 billion in taxes. So any form of crackdown on the fast food industry could result in unemployment. Business owners could lose money. The YOLO fast food lovers will be disappointed. The ones impacted by the cascading impact of an economic downturn will remember the suffering when they vote. The government probably cannot afford to hurt so many people in one fell swoop. So they continue the act of appeasing everyone without making any meaningful changes. But it's not all gloomy. A change is finally coming.
The FDA today greenlit another weight loss drug, joining a market that's already booming.
Driven by another powerful lobby, the pharma lobby. This lobby is in fact the biggest lobby in the US. In 2023, their lobbying spends of $378 million were the highest among all industries. A drug company, Novo Nordisk, is selling two powerful drugs, Ozempic and Wegovy, that can help reduce obesity. Broadly, they work by making you feel full and killing your appetite for calories. And these drugs have gained immense popularity. The US healthcare providers wrote 9 million plus prescriptions for these weight loss drugs in the last 3 months of 2022. But here's the twist. In order to sustain the weight loss, most people will have to keep taking the drug. Weight loss solutions and drugs are not new to the US. It's just that none of them were perfect and safe. Can Wegovy and Ozempic be that perfect solution? How will big food combat this big change? Only time will tell. Now, before moving to the final part of the video, where we talk about India's obesity situation, let me give you a quick recap. World War II ended with the US winning and Japan losing. While the US had abundance of resource, Japan was stuck with scarcity. Yet Japan rose to power with its healthy eating habits, and the US succumbed to the unhealthy way. It is all about the choices you make. Now, let's talk about India. In India, we love following the West, the cool American culture. I remember the first time I ordered a Subway. I was in 8th standard and I wasn't used to eating out a lot. Which sauce, which bread, which veggies. It was so complex. But once I did it, I felt like I belonged to the cool American culture. Honestly, it's a trap. A trap that has made us the third most obese country in the world after US and China. I'm not saying it, a Lancet study is. If you didn't already know, we are also called the diabetes capital of the world. But there's a paradox playing out. As per the same Lancet report, the countries with the largest number of underweight adults in 2022 were India, China, Japan, Indonesia, Ethiopia and Bangladesh. As per Niti Aayog report 2023 on National Multidimensional Poverty Index, more than 3 out of 10 Indians were undernourished and 2 out of 5 Indians were deprived from cooking fuel. So maybe it's true that we live in two Indias. One is obese and the other is not getting enough food. And both these cohorts are pretty sizable. Where do we go from here? Here's what I see. Two distinct trends are shaping in our country. One, India has become one of the most lucrative markets for the fast food industry. As per a Bloomberg article, sales of snacks and soft drinks in India almost tripled over the past decade, exceeding $30 billion in recent years. In fact, Unilever PLC expects India to become its largest source of revenue within a decade. Our packaged and convenience food segment is amongst the fastest growing. Second, a section of India's population has started looking at the ill effect of packaged food and is demanding better, high-quality, healthy foods. All thanks to Revant Himansika, the food farmer. This section believes that unlike the United States, maybe it's not too late for us to change our eating habits. But these consumers would mostly be the more affluent metro city dwellers. Maybe because they will be the ones who can really afford the expensive healthy food to make the switch. And on the other hand, we have people with restricted wallets who may not be able to afford healthy food because of a high food inflation. Yeah, a little counterintuitive. For the not so rich ones, it would be a choice between going hungry or opting for cheaper, mass-produced, poor ingredient quality fast food, and choosing this could increase their risk of obesity. In fact, a rural obesity study in Telangana revealed that many rural families now eat more carbohydrates because they are more affordable and more convenient than trying to source limited protein and micronutrient-rich options, which are more costly. And honestly, big food is making it even more difficult to say no to junk. As big food is now threatened by Big Pharma's miracle drug in the developed countries, they are stepping up their efforts in other parts of the world. Plus, the K-shaped growth of India's economy, where the rich gets richer and the poor gets poorer, could also start reflecting in the health of its people. In this case, the rich could get healthier and the poor could get obese. But I hope I'm proven wrong. I hope we don't become another United States. I hope we solve obesity on our path to becoming a developed nation. I hope that we can rise above our cravings and desires. Even if it requires extra effort, we need to choose healthy, not just for us, but also for others around us. Thank you so much for watching this video till the end. Do share it with your friends and inspire them to eat healthier and try to start eating healthy yourself. You can comment some healthy desi hacks you use so that we can all learn from each other. I have also added some book and video recommendations if you want to dive deeper in this. See you in the next video. Bye.